Hello, I'm Darren Slack, and welcome to Week 5 of NFA's QB Cast, your weekly prep talk podcast for helping everyone associated with game day to get better. It's Week 5, and as we continue our leadership series, we come to number 5 on the list of critical attributes for quarterback leaders on the field and in life, and that's competitiveness. Defined as having a strong desire to compete or to succeed, competitiveness is often seen as the number one coach attribute of QB leaders on the field. So why do we have it as number 5? Well, from my perspective, you may feel differently, and that's fine. The ordering of these attributes is based on the importance of the attribute to all the others. Combine that with the difficulty to develop it, and that's kind of how I came up with it. The first 4 leadership attributes we've covered in confidence, coachability, character, and discipline, those are foundational and primarily internally monitored traits within a leader. And because they're so closely tied to a person's maturity, they are also, in my opinion, the most difficult to develop. Now, from here on out, the attributes we'll be covering will be more easily observable by those around us. So competitiveness is the first of those more external attributes that is a non-negotiable to a team's needs. Coaches want a competitive leader. The objective of a team is the goal for which the team has been gathered, and that's success. The most obvious success a team will have is winning. Now, there are dozens of other successful components of team building and player enhancement, but at the pinnacle of any team's goal setting is victory in competition. The leader of a team must be competitive. They must possess a strong desire for success and winning. They must be willing and able to compete, and always wanting to compete. But here's the tricky part about competitiveness. For the true competitor, it's not just about winning and losing. You see, to think competitiveness is only concerned with winning and losing actually causes us to miss something deeper that fuels competitiveness. Yes, winning and losing are important to competitive people, that's true. But something you'll find that is even more critical to any real competitive leader in any context is the desire to improve, the pursuit of better. Now, when I say better, immediately we can wrongly shift the focus to comparison and superiority. Those are certainly aspects of bettering oneself. However, to only focus on comparison and being better than others detracts from a true competitive approach, and that is always to get better. Truly competitive people enjoy competition because they realize, regardless of the result, it makes them better. They can improve. True competitiveness in a leader is the insatiable desire to get better. When you encounter someone like Coach Nick Saban at Alabama, you'll find a competitive drive like no other. But there's little to no talk about winning and losing. He talks about process, improvement, and execution. He believes, as many other true competitors do, that if you're focused on getting better at all times, winning will take care of itself. Only thinking about being better than others, making comparisons or self-absorbed rankings, and even winning and losing can all be distractions from true competitiveness. In my experience, those who focus on winning and losing before a game experience much more anxiety and nerves, or overconfidence against a lesser opponent, than a quarterback whose only concern is using the competition as a way to get better. True competitiveness in a QB leader is seen in their always going game speed in practice, taking risks down the field and early downs, and a relentless passion to move the chains. They take care of the football by avoiding turnovers and recovering quickly from mistakes or deficits on the scoreboard. They focus on learning from failure, not languishing in it. They build on their success, not believing that they've arrived. Much of the immaturity, fear, and anxiety in quarterbacks stems from poor mental discipline and preparation for competition. They think more about the outcome of their performance rather than the process they go through to prepare for it. They worry about the possibility of failure and what that will mean to their fans, their families, and to their teammates. What will they think of them if they fail? They do their best to block out the doubting voices in their head, and they may be able to do it for a while, but inevitably in the big game when the pressure's really on, they can be exposed. The leader tempted to self-preservation or perfectionism is suffering from a constant low-grade fear of failure. This fear sidelines so many potentially great leaders because they allow too many unhelpful thoughts in their heads and listen to the wrong people. True competitiveness must replace fear in a leader with an unrelenting pursuit of getting better through competition. By remaining in a constant state of improvement in competition, win or lose, the leader is able to process success with humility and failure with perspective. Listen, you can have every character trait on this list in high measure, but if you lack this true get-better mentality in your competitiveness, you'll end up a career backup who never seems to be able to get to the next level, not only on a football field as a player, but in every area of your life. Getting better is hard. It hurts. It requires losing, failure, pain, difficulty, and suffering. Getting better is expensive to the soul of a man. The cost is often much higher than many are willing to pay, and therefore they project their own fear of failure on others. This is what selfish leaders who lack true get-better competitiveness do to their teammates. They withdraw, they isolate themselves, they blame shift, and they emotionally disconnect. They lack the confidence and coachability to rebound from their failure. They lack the character and discipline to serve others, and they give up under pressure. You study any successful person in sports or life, and you'll likely find more failure than success in their past. Now, when I say failure, I mean moments when opportunities were missed because of mistakes they made, performances not being good enough for teams they were on that lost. As we pointed out last week in our discussion of discipline, the pursuit of glory is worth the risk of failure. Competitiveness is the drive we possess to embrace the risk and give our best no matter what. And that process is demonstrated in a passion to get better. Okay, coach, so how do I develop competitiveness? Well, true get better competitiveness is developed in 3 ways primarily. Number 1, studying and understanding your opponent and yourself. Number 2, accountable goal-setting competition with ourselves and others on our team. Number 3, finding competitive advantage in competition against better opponents. All right, let's talk about the first one, studying and understanding our opponents and ourselves. We need to spend a lot of time studying and understanding our opponent. By knowing what our opponent does well, we learn the best way to build strategy, focus, confidence, and things like that to compete with them. Knowing your opponent's strengths and weaknesses through scouting and film study builds a readiness to compete with them. It removes doubt and builds determination. It removes the anxiety of not knowing what you're facing. Even if they're better than you in many ways, you actually get better when you know what they do, how they do it, and why. If they're not as good as you get better by focusing on what you need to improve in from the last game. This is the need we have to regularly study and understand ourselves. Like studying an opponent, what strengths and weaknesses do you possess? You need to draw out your coaches for their opinion of you. You need to ask hard questions and pursue input by asking follow-up questions. Coach, what skills do I have that I'm doing well in? Which ones do I need to work on? What can I do to improve these weak areas during the season? I would recommend you spend some time with your defensive coordinator on film and ask him to watch and evaluate how he would play against you. What does he know about you from film? What are your tendencies? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I think you'll find, as so many others have, that the greatest limit to your success is not your opponent, but it's your own limiting view of yourself. Let others help take you where you want to go and where your team needs you to go. And in getting better through that difficult process of self-assessment, your competitiveness will grow. All right, let's talk about number 2. Accountable goal-setting competition with ourselves and others on our team. Knowing your strengths is important because you need them to lead the charge into competition. You must always focus on utilizing what you are best at doing when under pressure. The moment you attempt to compensate or focus on your weakness or failure, you're going to lose heart and you're going to give up, and that's not what you want in competition. In order to improve where you're weak, you must challenge yourself in practice to develop those areas through competing against goals you set for yourself, goals set by the coach, and through achievement in skills and strength against other teammates in competition. This is the epitome of moving the chains every day just a little farther to shore up any areas where your ability to compete under pressure may be lacking. You got to do it when no one's watching with your teammates at your school. This is arguably the most difficult step in self-improvement because it requires us to look squarely into our inadequacy and to change. Seeking to alter an ingrained behavior is the most challenging step a leader has to take. It doesn't matter what the issue is. The willingness to change for the sake of the team's success is a defining mark of true competitiveness in a player. The player who takes practice for granted, doesn't respond to input, is offended when challenged, and only does the minimum is not the competitor he needs to be, regardless of what he says outwardly. When it comes to competitiveness, like discipline, actions are the only thing that matters. Words are meaningless to competitiveness. Competitiveness is action. Words to an opponent are useless on a football field. It's what you do that defines you. That is also true in how you prepare as a leader. Talk isn't cheap, it's pointless. True competitiveness acts, everyone else talks. Make no mistake, an unprepared leader will not be a competitive leader we can trust. So, pursue an accountable goal-setting relationship with coaches and players that includes competition whenever possible. The more you compete, the more you understand how to compete, the more you understand your weakness, and the more you develop competitiveness as you get better. All right, let's talk about number 3. finding your competitive advantage in competition against better opponents. As I said in the last point, words are meaningless to competition. There's a moment when all the talking has to stop and we compete on game day. Competition should always be in view when we're developing as leaders. Competition is at the heart of why we need leadership at all. We need leaders who are willing to charge into competition in a manner that others courageously follow. The place where leaders learn to compete at the highest level is against better opponents. You need to find people and teams who do things better than you and compete with them. When you compete with them, watch how they work, learn how they win, observe their disciplines, and get better. Too many young and immature leaders miss the value of playing better teams because they're worried about being made to look bad or their performance may fail, and so they're worried about that. Instead of stepping up to the challenge, they make excuses and complain, never realizing that they're being given the best close-up look at what it takes to be successful. We need to instead learn what better opponents do best. You'll learn their competitive advantage, and that is the secret to your next level. As we compete, we must be seeking to maximize the thing or things we do best that gives us an advantage over others. It's something called a competitive advantage. In business, competitive advantage is the superiority of an organization because of something it does better. This is called differentiation, that thing you do that sets you apart from all the rest and makes you more successful. We have to know what makes us different and special as a team. We have to know that as a leader as well. Leadership on a team that understands its strengths is a team with competitive advantage. These leaders will be young men passionately committed to getting better all the time. There is a unique maturity you'll see in the way they prepare, serve younger players, and bring their best effort on game day, and this is the leader we need to be. These great leaders have settled into an unrelenting state of constant improvement that gives them a competitive advantage over everyone they play. They don't get nervous like others do, they aren't swayed by momentum changes under pressure, and they execute better after failure. They don't get down on themselves, they encourage one another, and they're always believing in each other. Now, there are certainly many other factors that can influence competitive advantage in a program. Talent and coaching, practice and preparation processes, and certainly resources. But ultimately, true competitive advantage is about leadership that's unswervingly committed to the pursuit of getting better. Without that get better perspective under pressure, you can have all the other elements and still fail miserably, leaving everyone watching to question what's missing. You see it all the time in talented, well-coached, highly resourced quarterbacks who collapse without explanation. I would submit those young men would need to evaluate their level of competitiveness in terms of their desperation to get better. They may talk a big game, seem to have all the confidence in the world, and it's all just words. I think you'll find that many of them are unwilling to do whatever the great ones do every day in pursuing feedback, coaching, and accountability to serve their teams. They just don't really want to get better. Be the competitive quarterback your team needs by being relentlessly committed to getting better for competition. Do this by studying your opponent and yourself, setting up accountable goal-setting competition with your teammates, and keep looking for meaningful ways to compete every chance you can against better opponents. I hope that encourages you to sustain your competitiveness as leaders, and next week we'll dive into another important attribute. But this week, let's demonstrate that competitiveness in our games as leaders with a passion to get better. We wish you the best, NFA Nation, in your games this week, and we'll talk to you next week after your win.